The Taken at Gordon Manor. Episode 12, The Return. The carriage pulled up to Gordon Manor, looking impressively foreboding as always, the stone facade stained and speckled from a century of sitting in the elements of the countryside. The iron gates stood open, their hinges gone dark with rust, and the long gravel drive that led to the house was bordered on either side by hedgerows that had grown wild and untended, reaching inward as if the grounds themselves had been slowly reclaiming the order that human hands had once imposed upon them. "It looks rather run down, doesn't it, Wilbur?" Celestina said wistfully, her face turned toward the window, one gloved hand resting against the glass. "Indeed," Wilbur said, watching her watch the house. "I'm sure Timothy will have it back to its grandeur in no time." He said it with more confidence than he felt. He took Edmund from his bride's arms so she could climb out of the carriage, the boy squirming and reaching toward the house with the unself-conscious curiosity of a child who had not yet learned to be afraid of anything. The footman assisted Celestina down before moving to remove their trunks from the back. More trunks would be right behind them on several more carriages. This wasn't just a visit after all. "Hello, sister," Ruth chimed as she flowed out of the house, her skirts sweeping the front steps, her face arranged in the warm and capable expression that Wilbur had come to think of as entirely Ruth. A woman who had learned long ago how to make order out of whatever chaos life handed her. "Hello," Celestina said softly. Ruth took Edmund from Wilbur's arms without ceremony and immediately began cooing and pressing kisses to the boy's dark hair, and Edmund, to his credit, tolerated this with remarkable patience for a child of 3. "Timothy," Wilbur said, turning to bow to the Viscount, who had appeared in the doorway behind his wife, with his hands clasped behind his back, and his expression set in that particular combination of warmth and practicality that seemed to characterize everything about him. Timothy shook his hand firmly and directed them inside, holding the great front door open with the easy authority of a man who had made himself at home in someone else's house through sheer necessity. "It's been a mess here these 3 years," Timothy began as they crossed the threshold into the dark panelled entry hall. His voice carried down the corridor, unhurried and matter-of-fact, the voice of a man reporting on the state of an estate the way another man might report on the weather. "Since Dickie died, the solicitors have searched high and low for Cousin Barty. He's still missing. If it weren't for Dickie specifically placing us in his will to manage the estate, I'm afraid it might have sat empty for the entire 7-year waiting period before it passes to Edmund." He reached out as he said it and grasped little Edmund's hand where Ruth still held him, giving it a single solemn shake, as if welcoming the boy to the weight of his future inheritance. "It's a shame we have no lord to run this great household," Timothy added, and then he winked at Wilbur, a knowing, dry sort of wink, the kind that said everything without saying anything at all. That a viscount or a baron could run an estate just as well as any lord who had been born into it. Perhaps better. "Ruth," Celestina said, adjusting Edmund's bonnet where it had gone crooked in the transfer of arms. "Tell me honestly, has it been safe?" "Yes." Ruth's voice was steady, the word falling with the particular weight of someone who had thought carefully before answering. "I wouldn't have sent for you if not. The magistrate has done a wonderful job getting the townsfolk under control. It's practically illegal to mention anything that happened all those years ago. I have felt quite safe since we arrived last year." "A year?" Wilbur began carefully, the words coming out measured and deliberate. "And nothing has reappeared?" The 4 of them stood in the entry hall, and the questions settled over them like dust, touching everything and making nothing heavier than it already was. They all knew what he was referencing, but, honouring the magistrate's unspoken code, they danced around it with the practiced grace of people who had learned that some things were better left unnamed. "Nothing," Ruth said simply, "not a blue light in the sky." "While I do feel safe," Ruth continued, her tone shifting into something more candid as she led them further into the house, Edmund still balanced expertly on her hip. "I'm afraid we have no associations with the gentry whatsoever. We have indeed been ostracized from all events round about. The invitations simply stopped coming, and the ones we sent were declined without reply." She paused at the door to the sitting room and turned back to look at Celestina with a wry expression that contained more humor than self-pity. "But no matter. We are not much for parties and balls anyway. Right, Celestina?" "I am glad we are all together again," Celestina said softly, stepping into the sitting room and looking around at its familiar proportions, the furniture rearranged slightly, Ruth's things mixed in among what remained of Dicky's. "Under the best of circumstances, it is better this way anyway." She paused, and something more complicated moved across her face before she continued. "Giving Baroness Manchester her estate back for now, she will miss Edmund, but she will not miss me." Now, Wilbur said quietly. "She loves you very much." "Maybe," Celestina said, and there was no bitterness in it, only the particular tiredness of someone who had arrived at a truth through long consideration. "But she doesn't like me very much." "How so?" Ruth asked, settling Edmund onto the settee beside her, with the efficiency of someone comfortable around small children despite having none of her own. "We have very different ideas on how to parent our little Baron." "Ah, of course," Ruth nodded, the kind of nod that contained volumes. "I am glad for you that Father will not be here to insert his opinions into your parenting. God rest his soul." The room received this observation in silence for a moment, each of them holding their own private accounting of Dicky Grover, what he had been, what he had cost them, what they owed his memory in the way of grief. "I have set up the nursery for you. It is your old room, not the nursery." Ruth rose from the settee with Edmund under her arm, her tone brightening with the particular enthusiasm she brought to practical matters. "We have turned that into an art room. It had too much light for nap times. Come, let's take a look." She led them out of the sitting room and through the dark panelled halls, past the portraits and the old tapestries and the closed doors of rooms that smelled of must and memory, and then up the impressive stone stairs to the first floor where the ceilings were lower and the air was cooler and the whole house felt older and more itself. Wilbur noticed that Celestina seemed lighter since arriving. It was visible in the way she moved through these familiar corridors, her shoulders easier, her pace more natural, her eyes moving over the walls and doors and windows with something closer to fondness than dread. The presence of her sister was doing it, he thought. 3 years of quiet in Derbyshire had been good for them both, but there was something particular to Celestina about being near Ruth, as if Ruth's particular brand of steady, pragmatic warmth was the only thing that had ever fully convinced her she was allowed to exist without apology. Wilbur, by contrast, felt strange. The memories in this house were not the kindest to his soul, and every corridor they moved through deepened the feeling that he had made an error in agreeing to return, that he wanted to bolt back down those impressive stone stairs and out the front door and onto the road north toward Derbyshire, where the ceilings were higher and the air smelled of heather, and the years of peace they had built together sat in every room like good furniture. It had taken time, those 3 years. But eventually Celestina had learned to relax around him, to let the careful watchfulness that had defined her since childhood ease enough that she could simply be in a room with another person without calculating every possible threat. They had spent their days reading, walking, eating together, and slowly, so slowly that neither of them could have named the moment it happened, they had become friends. There was no blue light in Derbyshire. There was just peace. It had given them the chance to build something that neither of them had ever quite had before: trust. Wilbur, already fallen for Celestina, had kept falling more and more each day, and eventually quietly, carefully, she for him. Wilbur, she had said one evening as he drew her into his arms before the fire. "Yes, my love, I love it here. It is a haven, is it not? It's not home. It will feel like home eventually." Besides, you don't have a home to return to. You must make the best of it here." She had been quiet for a moment, and he had thought perhaps she was simply tired, that the conversation was finished, that she would pull away and retire as she sometimes did when the evening grew late and her thoughts turned inward. But then she had spoken again, carefully, as if testing the weight of words she had not said before. "Although, you feel like home." It was as close to "I love you" as he had thought he might ever get from her. So he kissed her, and she kissed him back. 9 months later, Edmund came into their lives. The nursery was in the older part of the house where the walls were dark and close and the stone beneath the plaster was cold even in summer. Ruth had hung heavy drapery on the walls and over the windows, and the room existed in a kind of deliberate twilight that softened its more austere features into something almost cozy. A crack in the curtains admitted a single blade of afternoon light that fell across the furnished corner of the room, illuminating the care with which Ruth had prepared it. A fine crib of turned wood, lush bedding in cream and pale blue, a small table and a rocking chair positioned close to the fire. Ruth had also hired a nurse and a nanny, both of whom appeared in the doorway with the quiet efficiency of professionals, curtsying to Celestina and immediately beginning the professional assessment of Edmund that characterized their kind, something the Manchesters had not bothered with thus far. As the ladies fell into animated discussion about feeding schedules and nappy changes and the particular preferences of a 3-year-old who had opinions about everything, Wilbur moved through the room slowly, surveying it with the detached attention of a man who is looking at one thing and thinking about another. There was the crib in the corner, the heavy drapery, the crack in the curtains casting its blade of light, the beauty of the furnishings Ruth had provided, visible in small details, the carving on the crib posts, the quality of the bedding, the brass fittings on the small trunk at the foot. Wilbur reached out and touched the finely honed edge of the crib, his fingers resting on the polished wood of the rail. And something happened to him that had no name in the language of polite society. The bars, the lush bedding, the particular quality of warmth in a small enclosed room designed entirely for the protection of a small vulnerable person. It reminded him of his nursery in Derbyshire, which had remained unchanged his entire life. The same crib repainted but the same heavy curtains, the same rocking chair. A feeling came over him then, not quite a thought, not quite a dream, something older than both, a memory washing over him now, as if he were living it again in real time, as if the past 3 decades had simply folded in on themselves and deposited him, without warning, back inside the body of an infant lying in his own crib in the dark. A ball of light, blue and terrible, floating through the wall as if the wall were nothing, as if wood and plaster and stone were simply suggestions that it chose not to honor. It hovered above the crib, above him, above his small, helpless body that could not move or call out or do anything but watch with eyes that were too young to understand what they were seeing. The light bounced gently, as if bobbled by an invisible wind, pulsing with that slow, rhythmic patience that he had spent 30 years not remembering. And then, pain. Stabbing pain, right between his eyes, precise and absolute, as if something had reached through his skull and pressed its finger directly into the center of his mind. He had screamed for his nurse with every bit of strength his infant body possessed, the sound tearing out of him in gurgles and shrieks until he had no air left, until his chest was empty and his throat was raw, and the scream became silence. The blue ball fled as quickly as it had come, vanishing back through the wall with the same contemptuous ease with which it had entered, taking the pain with it in increments, the way a tide withdraws, slowly enough that you notice it leaving. But still he had cried. Long after the pain was gone, long after the light was gone, he had cried in the dark of his nursery with the particular terror of a child who has experienced something his mind has no category for, something that cannot be made into a story or a lesson or a comfort. What do you think, Wilbur? Celestina's voice. He came back to himself with a lurch that he hoped was not visible, blinking the present back into focus around him. The room, the crib, the blade of light through the curtain, the sound of his son's voice asking the nurse something in the imperious tone he had apparently inherited from no one in particular. About what? He managed. Oh dear, Celestina laughed, and there was genuine amusement in it beneath the annoyance. He really is not interested in nursery decor one bit, is he? I am afraid not, he said, turning toward her. Her expression changed. Wilbur, her voice dropped. You are pale as a ghost. I am quite all right. She looked at him with the particular quality of attention that 3 years of marriage had given her. The ability to read him in the way that most people never learn to read anyone. Not because she had studied him, but because somewhere beneath the careful social surfaces they both maintained, she simply knew. It was not often that memories of this kind surfaced for him. He had learned, from his time with his wife, that such things were common for her, especially in the years before her mother died, though they had grown less frequent during their peace in Derbyshire. He had always assumed this was because Derbyshire was far enough from Gordon Manor that whatever force or presence attached itself to this place could not reach them there. He was beginning to reconsider that assumption. Celestina looked at him knowingly, and the room was quiet around them for a moment, in the particular way that rooms become quiet when something is about to be said that has no business being said in public. A memory, perhaps? Her mouth had not moved. Wilbur went very still. He nodded slowly just once. Celestina's eyes went wide. She looked shocked in the way that people look shocked not when something impossible has happened, but when something they had quietly stopped believing in has suddenly turned out to be true after all. They had not been able to hear one another since they left Gordon Manor 3 years ago. Wilbur excused himself shortly after, citing the need for air after the long journey, which was not entirely untrue. The house had begun to feel smaller the moment they stepped inside it, the dark panelled walls pressing inward, the low ceilings of the older wing closing over him like a hand. He walked out through the back of the manor and onto the grounds, following the path that led toward the old garden wall, his boots finding the familiar stones as if his feet remembered what his mind had tried so hard to forget. The air was cool and carrying the particular smell of the countryside in the late afternoon. Earth and grass and something older underneath both. He breathed it in and tried to let his thoughts settle. He was being irrational. That was what he told himself. The memory in the nursery was simply that. A memory. An old wound reopened by proximity, by the sight of a crib in a darkened room, by the particular quality of light through heavy curtains. He was not a child anymore. He was a grown man, a husband, a father, a baron. He had rebuilt himself in Derbyshire from whatever broken thing he had been before, and he was not going to let this house dismantle that work in the space of a single afternoon. The telepathy was more difficult to explain away. He stopped walking and stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the old ivy continuing its slow conquest of the garden wall, and tried to think clearly about what it meant that Celestina had heard him again. After 3 years of silence, after 3 years of ordinary, unremarkable, blessedly quiet marriage, in which neither of them had transmitted a single unbidden thought to the other. They were back at Gordon Manor, and the connection had simply resumed, as if it had never stopped, as if the silence of Derbyshire had been the aberration, and this terrible intimacy was the natural order of things. He did not like what that implied. Edmund was not yet 2 years old, small still, unsteady on his feet, babbling more than speaking, entirely unaware of the world's capacity for darkness. And yet, Wilbur's mind kept returning to his own nursery in Derbyshire, and the blue orb that had come for him when he was small and helpless and too young to understand what was happening. He suspected, with a cold certainty he could not explain, that Celestina had been no older when whatever had happened to her first began. His mind moved to the place he had been avoiding all afternoon, and he let it, because refusing to look at a thing had never once made it less real. What if it was starting again? Not for him, not for Celestina, for Edmund. The thought arrived with such force that he pressed his hand briefly to his sternum, as if he could hold the fear inside his chest and prevent it from spreading outward into his face and hands and voice where someone might see it. Celestina was already watching him. If she heard this thought the way she had heard the last one, there would be no containing it. He could not protect Edmund from something he didn't understand. He had not been able to protect himself. He had not been able to protect Celestina, even after marrying her. Even after moving her 150 miles north, even after building walls of routine and peace and ordinary life around them both. The walls had held in Derbyshire, but they were not in Derbyshire anymore. He stood in the garden and breathed, and gradually the spiral of his thoughts began to lose momentum. And then everything went quiet. Not the ordinary quiet of a late afternoon garden, a different quiet, complete. The kind that pressed against the ears like water, that felt less like the absence of sound and more like sound itself, had decided to stop. His ears popped. Once. The world sealed around him in that impossible stillness he recognized with the body before the mind. He could not move. The impulse to step forward, to turn, to call out, it traveled from his brain to his limbs and simply stopped. He waited. He breathed. Nothing came. Between one heartbeat and the next, it released him. Sound returned. The birds, the wind, the distant clatter of the house. The garden was simply a garden again. He walked back to the house and told himself what he needed to hear. The mind did strange things under stress. He had been dreading this return for weeks, and the dread had found expression in a moment of nothing. He was frightening himself, that was all. When he met Celestina in the corridor, he offered her his arm and remarked that the garden was very overgrown and Timothy would have his work cut out for him come spring. She took his arm, said nothing, but she looked at him the way she always did when she knew he was not telling her everything. He smiled. She smiled back. And for many years, it was fine. The blue lights did not return. Edmund grew from a toddler into a boy. Curious and bright and entirely, mercifully ordinary. The manor came back to its grandeur. Celestina settled in as if she had never left, and Wilbur, to his own surprise, settled too. The memories faded. The fear faded with them. Edmund turned 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6. Cousin Barty never returned. After 7 years of absence, the solicitors declared him legally dead, and Gordon Manor passed at last to Edmund, Baron Edmund Manchester, master of Gordon Manor, at the age of 6. He was almost 7 now. To be continued.